Hi, everyone, and welcome. I know that a lot of you have already said hi in the chat. Hi to those of you who have said hi and those who doesn't. My name is Raquel. I'm talking to you from Lisbon. And if it's the first time that you are here, this is Ironhack. Ironhack is a global tech school. We have bootcamps all over the world around web development, data analytics, of course, and UX UI design. Both part-time and full-time, and also remote. So if you want to know a little bit more about our bootcamps and so on, you have here a few useful links that you can look at. Okay, we also have campuses all over the world. So in Europe, in America, and it's actually from Barcelona, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So you can ask us about anything related to our campuses or to Ironhack. We'd be very happy to answer your questions. And I'd love to know where you're seeing us from, because I know that you are seeing us from, I don't know, a lot of places in the world. So please let us know where you're seeing us from. I'd love to know. And for today's webinar, we're going to talk about data storytelling, and it's going to give you a great overview, a bit of the theoretical part and a bit of the practical parts. And before we start, I just want to give you a heads up on the crowdcast rules and so on, if it's the first time that you are here. Oh, Kuwait, Slovenia, that's different.
Nice.
Great, guys. So you've discovered the comment section, which is amazing. Wow. All answers are arriving right now. Amazing. A lot of different places. Berlin,
Yeah.
a lot of people from Berlin. Amazing. All right, guys. So if you want to ask any questions, you can, of course. But during the webinar, Anna will be talking and we'll be exposing the topics. So let's leave all the questions to the end, which means that you can post them so you don't forget them, and we can tackle them in the end on the Ask a Question section that you can see here. All right? On the Ask a Question section, you can upvote the topics or the questions so that they appear on top. And you see that I already left a topic in here with the Tableau public version. In the link of the webinar, you saw that you could have downloaded it before, so it would be easier in the end for you to code along, or follow along. In any case, if you want to download it now, it will take a bit of time, and I will explain this a little bit. But you can still try to download it now to have it on the end of the webinar or in the second part of the webinar to work on. Okay? I think that's it from my parts. Welcome everyone from South Africa, Miami, Florida. Amazing! I'm amazed by this. All right, I will give the word to Anna right now. Oh, and just before we go, this webinar is recorded from the people who asked. So if you can't follow along everything, don't worry. Just try to listen as much as you can. Then you can review it later. Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Thank you, Raquel. Guys, it's great to see that so many people from different places are joining, so that's very exciting. From my side, I just want to introduce myself a bit. My name is Anna. I've been in analytics, I'd say, almost 6 years now, and I've always been doing digital analytics, and I wanted to upgrade my skill set, and I went to do a course in Ironhack, and now I'm supporting as a teacher associate in the Barcelona campus. And yeah, today we're going to talk about storytelling. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what I'm about to present. Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to go through the presentation. Raquel, can you just give me an okay that we can see properly my screen?
I can see your screen properly. I can hear you fine. But guys, if you have any problems, give us a feedback. Can you hear us? Can you see everything? Leave it in the comments. There's a bit of a delay. We'll only be seeing the answers a few seconds later. But please tell us if it's fine.
Okay. Wait, I'm going to share it again. Sorry. I'm going to just the Chrome tab. The actual presentation. Okay, guys. So let's start. So today we're going to be talking about explaining stories with data. And I want to cover the principles of data and how you can present it in a way that it's also compelling for your audience, because I think data is the actual story part of presentations is very important, because it's really what makes your audience actually grasp the information that you want them to remember. So let's get started. So actually, I want to kind of start with a personal story. Around 5 years ago, when I was recently graduated from my degree, I started working in an e-commerce company, and my boss actually asked me, okay, Anna, we would love you to present this like historical analysis of all our digital performance, and you're going to be presenting to the leadership team of the company. So as you can imagine, this was like a big opportunity for me, so I was very excited. So essentially, I started building this massive presentation with all the possible graphs that you had. I was putting pie charts, bar charts, any type of chart. And I went into the presentation really feeling very ready. I had presented everything that I had analyzed, everything there was to analyze. And by the end of my presentation, I opened the space for questions, as you normally do. And this was kind of the faces I was facing. And I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there was one specific person that was looking a bit like this lady over here. And this was my head of leadership of the company. So he actually opened his mouth and he gave me this question. And the question basically, after all my 30 slides presentation was, so what? And I was in shock at the moment because I thought, okay, I've literally presented everything that there is to present. What do you mean, so what? But he actually had a very important point. I was reporting insights. So I was essentially just showing graphs. So reporting for reporting. But I was not actually analyzing any of the data. I was not driving any call to action with my audience. And this is where I saw that rather than an analyst, what I was up until that moment was a reporter. So I think this is something which is not only common to my specific situation, but it's something that it actually happens quite often. And nowadays, there is really this massive gap between exploring data and how you actually communicate this data. And this is something very important because when you present information, your goal is not only to communicate data, but you actually want to drive meaning on your audience. Okay, so this is, I think, the first key point that you need to leave you need to get from this session. To continue, I want to talk to you about the iceberg metaphor. This is something that I use myself, and I think it's actually a very good depiction of the work of an analyst or anyone that has to present some insights. Because I don't know if you're aware of this, but for an iceberg, normally we only see 90% of the mass of an iceberg. Sorry, we don't see 90% of the mass of an iceberg. We can only see that top, the 10%. And the work of an analyst is very similar because there's a lot that goes unnoticed when it comes to the work we do. You do a lot of data gathering and data cleaning, all the analytical part where you need to apply statistics. If you're advanced, you can go to predictions, machine learning, and potentially this has the implication of not sleeping for days. But what tends to happen when you need to present to not a senior audience is that you normally get this statement. And if there are any Ironhack over there, they know what I'm talking about. You do a lot of work, but then you get this. You have 5 minutes to present. And this is very common. So the importance here is if you only have 5 minutes to present, make it worthwhile. Make sure that what you present is perfectly tailored to that message that you want to get through to your audience. Because really, it's the only bit that they will see. Okay, so when you do your presentations, when you do your analysis, that last bit, you cannot expect just to put all your graphs that you have collated across all your exploration phase and just put it in your deck, which is essentially what I did for my presentation. You actually need to put a lot of thought in how you present that information. Okay, so if I were to ask you to leave this session with three key tips that I want you to learn, it would be these three. First of all, you need to know your audience. You need to learn how to build the story. And finally, you need to see how you can highlight key information. Okay? And at the end of these main key points, I will be showing you a great example of a visualization that I think is very representative of these three main points that we want to cover. Okay, so let's jump to the knowing your audience. This is super basic. okay? It might seem super simple, but you'd be surprised at how frequently people tend to forget this concept. When you present, you really need to focus on who you are presenting to, okay? You need to understand if this is going to be an informal audience or if this is going to be a very technical audience. If it's a technical audience, okay, you can present your statistical measurements in a complicated way. You can talk about your algorithm, you can talk about the parameters you used. But if you have a more generic audience, please don't do this. They really don't care, and you'll probably get them lost by slide number 2. Okay, so try to think on who you're presenting to. The next point I want to cover is try to understand what makes your audience tick. Because normally in corporate audiences, you need to think, for example, if you're presenting to the marketing team, you need to understand what is going to make them tick. What is the message that is going to resonate with this audience, and how you can drive action from this audience. If you just talk about how you did your analysis without thinking of your audience, believe me, you're not going to get there. You're not going to grab their attention, and you're probably not going to get any action from them. So remember who your audience is. Let's jump to the second point. So how to build a story? First of all, we need to understand as well that as humans, we love stories. Everyone loves a good story. And in fact, if you actually think about it, when we go to sleep, we keep dreaming of stories. Like, it's inherent in our biological behavior and also in our way of thinking. So when you get a good story to the mindset of your audience, you're going to get that empathy that is going to make them want to know what you have to say. Actually, when you tell a story and when you tell a good story, there is this sorry guys, apparently my camera is off. 1 second. Just a technical difficulty. Can you see my screen?
I think we can see your screen, right, guys? Can you please leave it in the comments? If you can hear everything fine, if you can see the presentation, perfect.
Yeah?
Yeah, then I think it's just your camera.
Okay, I can see myself in the camera, but Can you see me now, Raquel?
No. But we can see the presentation, so that's the most important thing.
Okay. Then in that case, I'm going to continue with the presentation, and then I can show my face if you want to see it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. The
Okay,
important
guys.
thing is a presentation.
Okay.
Okay, I'll leave you now to it.
Thank you, Raquel. So getting back to the point of actually understanding how our brain works, when we feel related or when we hear a good story, our brain segregates like an additional amount of a toxin called oxytocin, of a chemical called oxytocin. It's essentially like element of in our mind that makes us feel good. Okay, and essentially this is something that happens when you explain a good story. And there was this group of neuroscientists that actually did a very interesting experiment where they measured with MRIs the brain waves of a presenter, a guy that was actually presenting to this massive audience, and they also measured the brain waves, the MRIs of the audiences. And one thing that they discovered is that the same movement and the same brainwaves were seen reflected in the audience as well as in the storyteller. Meaning that when you hear a well-told story, your brain almost reacts as if you're experiencing it yourself. So that is super powerful. That is super powerful because it makes the audience super involved. So this is ideally what you want to get to when you do a great presentation. So I'm going to give you 2 super high level tips. Okay, so normally what tends to happen when you present to a corporate audience, for example, we kind of follow a very corporate structure. You start normally explaining what was the question that was asked before you started analyzing. Then you talked about the data you looked into and the data that you analyzed. You look into the statistical methods that you applied in your analysis. And from there, you share the type of insights that you gathered from your analysis. But thinking of it, that's very corporate. It's not our natural way of hearing a story. So my recommendation here is, remember when you were back in school and you had to write stories? In my case, I did not enjoy it when I was younger. But yeah, essentially in my school at least, they made us write these stories. And when you wrote the stories, they always kind of make you follow the same structure. You had the plot, you had the climax, and then finally you had like your grand finale, okay? And this is actually the way that you should be presenting into your audience, because by following the story structure, it will be much more memorable. So the plot essentially is the context that you need to give your audience for them to be able to follow your presentation and to understand. Normally, it's the type of information that when you share, your audience is kind of nodding along like, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. I understand you. I've been there. Then you have the climax point. You've tried to build an accumulative tension in your audience, and now you're arriving to that climax where you're actually showing to the audience what's interesting about what you discovered, what's interesting about those insights that you gathered from your data. By the way, a side note here, only show what's interesting. If there is information that you have that you know will not be interesting because it's something that people already know, do not share it. Just focus on the essential and the information you want them to know. Okay? So we have that climax, and this is that point where people are starting to open their eyes. They're actually super intrigued of, oh, that's very interesting. You know, you see it in their expressions. And finally, you get to the end of the presentation where you have like your grand finale. And your goal here is, again, reflecting who your audience is and being able to drive action from that specific audience, because you want them to be the activators of the information that you have shared. So normally in a corporate context, you don't present just for presenting. You normally want an action to be driven from your presentation. So this is where you need to hook up that audience and make sure that they actually do something with information that you have shared. So when I present, I like to do this test, and I call it the story test. So when I prepare my slides, I always like to keep the main insights and the main highlights as the titles, okay? You don't want to be presenting a slide of 12-month historical data of your sales and that be the title of your slide. No, you don't want to. That should be the title of your graph, not of your slide. Your slide should say, I don't know, let's say, for example, we had a massive spike in April because we saw a jump in sales. That's the message you want to put in the title. And then you have the message of your graph, that it's where you explain what you're actually showing, okay? So going back to the story test, one thing that I like to do is when I look at my data presentations, I like to read at my headers and read at my titles of all my presentation. And without actually looking at the data, I like to be able to follow what is it that I'm trying to convey in my presentation. So ignore the actual content of your slide, but just focus on the title and try to see if you can follow your story just by looking at the title. Okay? And if you're able to do that, you have passed the story test. And then the other key point that I want you to leave with is to repeat yourself. It really makes a difference when you enhance the messages that you want to express to your audience, because when they only hear it once, it will be very superficial and it will only stick on their short-term memory. But if you're able to reintroduce the concept and the takeaway that you want them to take home, they're going to start establishing it in their long-term memory. So this is why it's important to repeat your information. Now, let's go to the final and third point that I want you to get away from this overview on how to present data. We're actually going to play a little game, okay? And I'm going to show you a slide with a couple of numbers and 15 seconds to be able to count how many threes you have in that slide. You can put it in the chat and let us know what's your answer. So how many threes can you actually see in this slide? Okay, let's see if somebody gets it right. It took me a while. Okay, so time's up. Those 50 seconds are over, and then I will check with Raquel how many people got it right. But now let's do the same exercise. I'm gonna cut down the seconds to a couple of seconds, let's say 5, but with a different overview. So now how many threes are you able to see in this slide? Probably most of you have been able to see graphs pretty fast. We have threes in this slide. And what's the main difference? We have essentially shown the exact same slide, but here we're really trying to highlight the key information that I want you to see. So when we see images, it is very important that we're able to, and when we show graphs, it's very important that we're actually able to guide the view of our audience, okay? And this type of strategy, highlighting the numbers as much as possible, will help you drive that view of the audience to where you want them to focus. Today, there are many highlighting tactics that we can actually use, but for today, I just want to focus on 4 that we're also going to apply to Tableau, and I'm going to show you how you can use this type of tactics, highlighting tactics, in the Tableau software, okay? The first one we will look at is sorting. Sorting is essentially looking at all your data, and when you put up a graph together, just ordering it in a meaningful way. Let's say, for example, by volume of sales or quantity of products that are sold. Then we have the element of color. Color is really an element that you want to try to use in a very smart way. By saying this, I don't mean that your presentations and your graphs end looking like a rainbow, because that's not the goal, but use color as an advantage, again, to highlight a specific information or to highlight an additional variable that you want your audience to understand. Now I'll show you how we can do this in Tableau. Then we have size, also a very easy way to distinguish the importance and to guide the importance of your viewers' audience. Of course, the thing that is bigger will be very fast to see, and the thing that is smaller will be detected as the smallest one. And we will also do an exercise on this. And another one that I want to show you is just the concept of getting a data point and making sure that we make it stand out. And we can do this. If you have a graph in a presentation, you can do this by just adding a rectangle, or you can do it by putting it with a different color. So you can use different tactics. Okay, so we will cover these 4 concepts in Tableau, and I will just show you a quick intro of how Tableau operates, and we're going to do an exercise for each one of these. Okay, and finally, I want to show you an example which I think kind of encompasses all that we have gone through already. In this graph, you can see a graph that essentially shows you the volume of deaths in Iraq from 2003 to 2009. Okay, and you can see that the message is kind of, each bar represents the volume of deaths. And you can see that there's a message that in the past couple of years, there's clearly a decline. But what happens when you take the elements of this communication and you give it a different angle? Let's see. So this is actually showing the exact same graph that we're seeing on the left, but the creator has actually, a guy called Simon Scar, if you want to look him up, has actually used all the available elements in this visualization to be able to really drive one story. So, for example, we can see that now he has used the color red, and the color red depicts blood. He has also changed the orientation of our graph, and in a very visual way, you can almost interpret that these red bars are almost like blood drips. And finally, he has also changed the messaging, so the story of the graph. Now the title, the header tells you Iraq's bloody toll. And this is a very different message from what we're seeing on the left. So this guy has really used all the available elements to be able to show how same information can really inspire or can really project a complete different message. So in terms of audience, he has chosen a communication that is very applicable to anyone. Anyone can understand this graph. So he has simplified it. In terms of story, he has changed a message of positiveness of deaths are on decline to a message of Iraq's bloody toll, telling you how horrible and how horrendous this has been. And finally, he has been able to highlight key insights using elements such as color and the graph orientation. So he has covered the three areas that we have gone through in the presentation: knowing who the audience is, understanding and being able to project a specific message and a story, and finally, he has used elements to highlight the key insights. So this is essentially the introduction to the key concepts I wanted you to take away. And now we're going to do a session for Tableau where we're going to be mainly covering examples of how we can highlight key information from the third section of our presentation. So let's start. Actually, guys, I'm not sure if I'm going to go back to showing my face. Actually, in the information of this webinar, we actually shared a link for you to download Tableau. So if you have downloaded and you have received the data set that was sent, you should be able to follow this training session of Tableau, almost like a code along. And if you have not, don't worry, because this, as Raquel mentioned, this is going to be a recorded session, and you can essentially follow it later on or just practice it at home once you have the recording. Right, Raquel?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I left a link for Tableau if you didn't get a chance to download it. Heads up, it's going to be harder to download now because it takes a little while. So you can try, but if you haven't yet, it's okay that if you can't, you can review it later. I will set a link for the data sets if you haven't received it yet. So you can download it. It will be a drive link, okay?
Okay, cool, guys. So I'm gonna give you the intro, and then with the information you get later on, you can also try to replicate it. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Tableau. Okay. Wait, now I need to change my sharing screen, so you're gonna lose my screen for a second. Okay. Just one sec that I open the tool. Okay. Tableau Public is sometimes a bit slow. So don't worry if it's taking you a while to open. This is also happening to me. To give you a bit of intro to Tableau, in case you don't know about this tool, Tableau is essentially a visualization tool. And for today's purpose, I'm going to be sharing how you can use Tableau to build just graphs, okay, that you could potentially include in your presentation later on. But then in terms of concept, this is not only the things that we covered in the first part of the session are not only applicable to Tableau, but you can also apply it with any other visualization tools. Okay. There's a free public version of Tableau. I'm seeing some questions about free trials. There's two versions of Tableau. You have the public free version, which you can download. And the only thing is that any work that you do and you save in this version is essentially going to be uploaded in a cloud. So it will almost be public. Okay. And then there's a second version, which is a desktop version, but this is a paid version. They offer a 14-day free trial that you can use. But after that, you would have to pay. But I think if you're learning and you're starting with your journey, I think the public version is more than enough. So I recommend you that you simply use the public version. Okay, so let me share my Tableau screen. So, guys, you might have received a link of a data set. If you have received this link, I suggest that you download the data set because we're going to be doing some exercises with this data set. If you have not been able to access this data set, as of now, don't worry because I think a girl called Leire has just shared the link where you can download the data set. But if you're not able to get to this point, don't worry because this is going to be recorded and you can always practice a bit later on. Okay? Cool. Having said this, I'm going to go to Tableau. Okay. So normally, when you open up Tableau, I'm going to just leave myself here in case Raquel wants to tell me something. When you open up Tableau, you get this tab, okay? And this is the tab that tells you to connect to specific data sets. For this specific case, we're going to connect to an Excel file. And for example, if you have a CSV, you would need to go to connect to text file, etc. But for this case, we're going to connect to Microsoft Excel. Okay. And now we're going to be using the Sample Superstore Excel. Okay. So we just click on the Open button. So now, once you have opened this data set, you're going to be seeing a couple of different things. This is essentially the 3 tabs that we have in our Excel. We have an orders data set, a people data set, and then a returns data set. For this specific introductory example, we're going to be looking at order data, okay? And the way that we pass the information to be able to understand what's behind it, we need to click into orders and drag. Okay, so now over here, we're able to visualize all the information within our data. Row ID, for example, would be a unique identifier for the order. Then you have an order ID that it's like a way to format an order, a unique identifier with the order standards of this store. Then you have when the order was made, the ship date, the ship mode, who's the customer, the type of segment, geographical information, the region where the product was bought, and then your traditional performance metrics, sales, quantity, if there was a discount, and profit. Okay, so once we have this, oh, sorry, I think I stopped sharing my screen. You can still see my screen, right? Yeah, okay. So once we have this, we can start building our first graphs. And as mentioned in our presentation, I want to kind of focus on the areas of sorting data, color, using information to highlight, and then the concept of size to draw attention to and specific key insights. So let's go into sheet 1. Each individual graph in Tableau, it's built on individual sheets, okay? And you have a couple of elements within the tool, okay? This table's information is showing you everything that is in kind of this blue color, so ABC, city, country, customer ID. These are categorical parameters, okay? And then anything that is in green are numerical parameters, so information that you can sum, do calculations with, etc. Okay, so here we have sales, quantity, profit, etc. And we have a couple of sections. I'm going to put it in full screen so that it's more visible. Okay, so in case that you didn't see it, anything that is marked in blue is categorical information, and anything that is in green is numerical information, like information that you can do calculations with, for example. Okay, and the first element that we looked into in the presentation on how to highlight key information is sorting. Okay, so I'm going to call this sort. Okay. Tableau is a drag and drop tool, so it's super user friendly. You will see, like, it's very easy to create nice stuff in a very fast way. And now, for example, I want to build a graph that shows sales, let's say, by subcategory. Okay, so the way we do this is we're going to take subcategory and we're going to be dragging it into rows, for example. And then I'm going to take the numerical variable sales and I'm going to drag it into columns. Okay, so immediately what the Tableau does is showcases the information in a graph. If by any chance you want to change the graph to in terms of the axis, you can do it very easily. You can change here. Okay, so this changes the axis, inverts the axis. But for this purpose, I want to leave it like this. Okay, so here we have the sales by subcategory within our store. Okay, and I want to add a label because I want to see what is the actual value of my sales. So the way we do this is just clicking on label. Okay, so from highlighting key information, this graph is not appealing at all. We kind of see many subcategories, but it's quite hard to identify which is our subcategory with a maximum amount of sales and which is the one that is less successful. And to make it more visible, here's where sorting comes into play. So if we want to sort our data, at the moment it's sorted by alphabetical value. We're going to go to subcategory. And in this little arrow, we're going to be pressing sort. And this little window should be popping up. At the moment, it's ordering by data source, but for this purpose, we don't want it to be by data source. We want it to be by field. You can see there are many different elements. You can sort it manually by how you want to do it, but for by alphabetic order, etc. But for this specific case, we want the sorting to be based on a field, and this field will be sales. Okay, you can choose all the different fields, but it makes sense to order it by sales because it's the data that I'm showing. And I want to do it descending. Okay, so now, in a very easy way, we can clearly see that phones is our top selling category in volume of sales, and that fasteners, we should essentially maybe not sell it because it's giving us a very bad sales volume, but maybe create margins, we don't know. But this is a good application of how you can clean your data and make the viewer see directly that font is our performing category. Now, we will do an exercise with color. Okay. Let's say for this specific case, we want to, again, look at, for example, sales by region, let's say. So I will do the same process. Maybe now I will turn it around to have a graph a bit different. And I will be showing sales. Okay, so I'm just going to check that no one's asking questions. Okay. So here, what Tableau is showing us is basically sales ordered by region. let's apply what we have already learned. Let's repeat what we have learned in the previous exercise. So, sorry. Let's go to region and let's sort this by sales. We want to order it from higher sales to lower sales because it will make it much easier to read. Okay, so we went to, I did that a bit fast, so I'm going to do it again a bit slower. We went to sort. Okay, and then we had the pop-up, and then we selected sort by field, descending, sales. Okay. So now it's very clear. The West region is clearly the one performing the best in terms of sales, and South and Central are doing the worst in terms of sales volume. But let's say, for example, that we want to add another variable into this graph that gives us more information. And for this, we're going to be using color and a calculated field. Okay? So we will create a variable for the concept of margin. Okay, so I'm going to go to my green section of numerical values, and I'm going to click on top of profit and right-click, create a calculated field. Okay, so go to the section of the green elements, numerical variables, and go to create and create a calculated field. And I'm going to create a value for margin, %. Okay, so the way we calculate margin, guys, is just profit divided by sum, by sales. Okay, and this is already by default summing up our figures. Okay, so now we have margin, but this will give us margin with an actual number, like a %. Okay, and now I want to drag margin to color to be able to not only see the volume by sales by the bar charts, but also be able to look at the concept of margin. So by dragging our new calculated field to color, okay, we can already see a very strong and different, powerful insight. For example, although Central is not the worst on sales, it looks like we actually have a negative margin for this region. Okay, so the story changes completely. Like you have a complete different insight, and now the attention is not only driven to the volume of sales by region, but it's also driven to the fact that the central region is doing great. Since these colors are not so representative, something that we can do is we can change the color scale. So we can go to your sum margin %. You click on the little arrow and you go to edit colors. Okay, and you can, if you click on this drop down, you have like a massive selection of options. So I'm going to go to red and green divergent because red tends to be negative and green tends to be positive. So we're going to change it. And now it's, again, a very powerful message. The West region is not only the highest in terms of sales, but it's also the one with the strongest margin. And the Central region is the second worst in sales volume, but clearly is underperforming compared with the South in terms of margin. Okay, so this is an example of how we use color to highlight key insights. Let's now open a new sheet and go to do an example for size. I'm going to minimize 1 second to see if anyone... Okay, some questions, but we can cover them later on. Okay, so this is one of my students' favorite graphs because it will entail a bit of geo information, and it's something that always looks very cool. So I'm going to show you guys how to do it. It's super easy. Tableau has already been able to identify city as a geographical variable. So if we drag city into columns, okay, and you go into the show me area and select this map, and we click on it, in a very easy and fast way, Tableau has been able to extract the city variable from the raw data and is able to associate a longitude and latitude element to that specific city. Okay, so now it has essentially pinpoint all the cities in our United States map. Okay, and let's use the previous element that we learned. Let's use color to look at sales. So now let's use margin in the same way that we did before to look at margin. Okay, so now it's telling us a similar concept as before. For example, Chicago is very bad in margin because the volume of the margin is actually negative. And I'm going to change the color again to make it a bit more meaningful. Let's do it red and green divergent to keep it the same way. Okay. And now let's add the element of size. Okay. And I want to include an element of size to depict the sales volume. Okay. So I'm gonna take sales and I'm gonna drive it into size. Okay. So what this does is essentially giving a bigger size to those cities that have bigger sales and a smaller size to those cities that have smaller sales volume. And in terms of the margin, it is giving the color, red color to areas with negative margin and vice versa. Okay, it's not so visual. So you can also change the size of your bubbles by going into size and dragging this up. So now, okay, I can clearly and very visually see that my top selling cities are New York City in #1 with a great margin, Los Angeles, and then finally Seattle. Okay, so a great example of how you can use the element of size to highlight the information. And finally, let's do a last exercise of highlighting information by making the information stand out. So I'm going to call this standout. Okay, and for this specific exercise, for example, we can look at, let's say, let's use subcategories as well because there's a lot of categories. And let's look also at sales. And let's look at quantity because quantity of volume of products sold. Okay, and let's apply the same elements that we learned before. So we want to sort it by the volume of sales because it's going to be much more visual. Field, volume of quantity in this case. And let's say, for example, you want to show the sales for all the subcategories, but for some specific reason, maybe because you want to launch a marketing campaign or another reason, you want to focus on specific subcategories to stand out, to make the information stand out. I'm going to add the label so that we can see the volume of quantity sold. But now we're going to do something to be able to highlight specific subcategories, okay? And to do this, we need to create a term called grouping in Tableau from the element subcategory. So by going on top of subcategory, okay, we can go to the section create and create a group, okay? And now here what we can see is we can see all the different subcategories. But for this specific case, I'm interested, for example, in tables, in furnishing concepts. So tables, furnishings, and chairs. So I select all of them and I'm going to group them. Okay, and I'm going to call these key subcategories. Okay, so now we have created a subgroup from our subcategories that has combined chairs, furnishings, and tables into the subcategory, key subcategory. I'm repeating myself a bit. And then we're going to create another group that basically contains all the other elements that are not under this key subcategories group. And we do this by pressing include other. Okay, so now we essentially have two groups, key subcategories and then other, which combines all the other categories. Okay? So let's say, for example, in a graph, you want just to showcase the information for these specific categories because you want to highlight the information for those. So what we can do now is from this subcategory group that we have created, we can drag it into color. And now what Tableau is doing is separating by color these two subcategories that you created. I'm going to change the color because these are horrible. I'm going to put subcategories in yellow, for example, to make them stand out a bit more. And then the other ones in gray. Okay, and now we have it. This is for the example on how you can use different elements of visualization to be able to guide your audience view to specific content. Now, Tableau is an amazing tool, guys. I'm going to close it for now. Okay. Tableau is an amazing tool just to create specific graphs to visualize on your presentations. It's also a great tool to create interactive dashboards, but this is a topic that we're not going to be covering in today's session. Maybe we're going to be covering it in another future session, and we need to check. But for this specific case, what I wanted to show you today in the tool is how you can use these elements of Tableau to be able to highlight the viewers' audience to specific content. I think I'm sharing my screen still. Another very interesting thing that you can do to kind of find inspiration with visualization is Tableau themselves. They have a website called Tableau Public Gallery, which is great because they have daily visualizations on how to present data, and it's a great source of inspiration for myself. So you can always go here and try to look at how people are visualizing data. We did V1, so of course we didn't achieve these levels of cool graphs, but it's super easy and you can easily get there. And one of the great things of being able to go through this Tableau gallery is that if you really like some specific graph and you want to kind of try to replicate it, for example, let's look at this Singapore. One thing that Tableau allows you to do is that you can actually download Tableau packages. So for example, if I go here, this little button actually allows you to download. And you can actually download the full Tableau workbook with all the data and with all the visualization. So even if at some point you're lacking inspiration, you can really use tools like this there's a lot of content out there. So just go and take the concept and try to make it your own. And from my side, guys, this is basically it. I wanted to cover these three topics: how to focus on your audience, how to look at improving your storytelling, and finally, looking at these three elements, looking at different elements to guide your viewers' audience to specific content in your graphs or slides. And I really hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll do in the future another session where we can actually even go deeper into Tableau and dashboarding and etc. So if you have any questions, please let me and Raquel know, and we will be happy to answer if we can. And if not, we'll try.
Yeah. Thank you, Anna. Look, you're still sharing your screen. I don't know if you are going to show something else.
No, that's it.
All right. Guys, before we go to the questions, some people are asking, yes, we are recording this and you will be able to see the recording. So don't worry if you didn't get to follow everything. You will be able to see everything all over again if you want to in this same link, but we'll make a follow-up so you don't forget, so you have it in your email. Don't worry about it. All right, guys? Thank you, Anna, very much. Please give your feedback. This was useful to you if you want something else or if you want to cover other topics. And we have a few questions, yes. I'll start with here, this, like not a lot, but I'll start with this one. With so many charts and data visualization tools, do you have any tips on how to choose the right graph?
It really depends on the information you wanna show. I'm a big fan of bar charts because I think they're so easy. Like even with concepts, people try to make these pie charts with all the percentages, and for me it's super hard to read. Like by default I tend to go to bar charts because I think they're so easy to see, and it really depends on your audience. I think if you want to kind of present something to a more generic audience, I will go with what's easy to read. Simplify. Don't try to make something super exotic. And then if you go to a more sophisticated audience or people with a more statistical background, then you can start doing, spider web graphs or this box plot. So I think it really depends. But I think choose the chart that emphasizes the point you want to make.
I think that's a complete question. Let know in the comments. I don't think you left your name in here, but let know in the comments if this answered your question. And Benjamin is asking, are we going to learn this on the bootcamp? You want to cover this, Anna?
Yeah. So actually, visualization is, as I mentioned, a very important part of actually getting your point through. And it is something that is covered in the bootcamp. For example, in the Barcelona case, I've been covering visualization in Tableau for a couple of courses. And if it's not me, it will be someone else. But yeah, Tableau and data visualization is an aspect that is covered in bootcamps.
That's a great question, though, guys. If you want to look at a bit of the curriculum and see like what's the stages of the bootcamps, you can see through the link here on the green button. One of the links is for the Ironhack courses, so you will see more information about it. All right. And Brian here asks, what's the difference, pros and cons, between Tableau and Google Data Studio?
I read that one. I liked it. Really, one thing that I think is also a key learning is once you get comfortable with data and visualization tools, it doesn't matter. Like there will be moments where Tableau will be much more applicable to your to the information that you want to showcase, and there will be moments where Data Studio is more applicable. Me, I like both. I think Tableau is more flexible in terms of what you can do by adding additional elements like variables of margin to show by color and stuff like that. And maybe Data Studio is still a bit more restrictive. But on the other hand, Google is always picking up very fast. So I think in terms of content, they'll probably be able to offer the same solution soon, and it's free. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, yes, if you're operating with digital data, Google Data Studio has like a super native integration to Google Data Studio. So for this type of digital dashboards, I also recommend Data Studio because it makes it very easy.
All right. We have another question here. How can we animate the graphic later? Can we connect Tableau with After Effects?
Yes, even in Tableau, you can animate it. I didn't cover it in this session because I know the audience was quite varied, people that didn't have experience, people that did. But actually within Tableau, you can do animations of graphs and kind of, I don't know, show, for example, progression across a timeline of sales, and it shows like a moving graph. And another way, in a very rudimentary way that you can add animations to graphs to highlight like different elements is using your traditional PowerPoint. If you have one graph, I sometimes, if I wanted to highlight two elements in two different slides, I essentially show a first version of the graph with a highlight of this is the area where I want to focus, arrow or square to highlight the specific insight. And then I showed like a same graph in the next slide, highlighting the other element. So that's a bit more rudimentary, but it works. The purpose is the same. I hope that answered your question. Also, you don't want like a presentation that gets people dizzy. Animate, but with a bit of conscience. Like you don't want people kind of, getting lost in the so many animations.
This part is covered in the bootcamp or not?
The animation or data visualization?
The animation, I think. Canary is asking here.
Yeah, when I presented to my students, we covered an area of animation and showing moving graphs and stuff like that, and how you can introduce them to your presentations. So in the Barcelona one for sure, but I'm assuming the other one as well.
No, yes, of course. There was a question here when the bootcamp of data analytics will start in Miami. Sorry to interrupt with a very specific question. There's no date yet, but I will leave a link in here so you can see the data analytics remote, which is the next best option if you don't have like a specific campus that you can sign up for. You can the remote bootcamp. I am actually doing one in part-time, so it's totally doable while you're working. If it's in part-time, the full-time, it's amazing as well. So you can have a bit of more information in here in this link. Okay, it's perfect. All right, let's see. Okay, there's an interesting question in here. How much of statistical analysis is possible with Tableau?
This Tableau is super flexible, but also the other tools. I think you can actually do some like coding within Tableau. You can do quite a lot, but it's a visualization tool at the end of the day. Like, for example, I like to maybe cover my more hardcore statistical analysis in other tools and just use Tableau as a visualization element. But it is true that you can do some statistical analysis within Tableau and include things like code snippets. And I showed you a very simple creation of a margin calculation. That, by the way, I noticed I didn't add the percent, but that's okay. But it is quite flexible to adapt it to, as long as you ingest the raw data, you can do quite a lot of things within the tool. Hope that answers the question. Yeah.
I hope so too. It's very complete. All right. Do you have any more specific? There's a question here from AT. And I'm not sure you covered these completely. Is it difficult to relate a table with another one? And maybe you know what this question is about, because I'm not completely sure. It's on the Ask a Question section.
Okay, just let me read. Yeah, I think AT, if I'm pronouncing the name well. Yeah, so I didn't cover it again because I thought it was pretty basic, but a pretty basic session introductory. But yeah, like let's say that you have two different tables and there's like an element which is common across both your tables. It's super easy. As long as this element is identical, it's super easy to link both tables by that common element and create like a super table with the data from your table 1 and the data from your table 2. So if this is what you're asking, AT, yes, you can do it very easily. It's actually super easy to do. Check it online. And if we do another session, we'll cover it.
Okay. So, Catherine, if you're having internet problems, no problem. You will get a link later, okay? You will get a recording in this same link and you attended the webinar. In any case, we will send you an email so you can keep it and nothing is lost. But it will be in this same link once we finish. It will take a while to render, but it will be available. Don't worry. All right, guys. Do you have any more questions for Anna or for me about Ironhack in general before we go? In any case, thank you, Anna, for this, and thank you for your feedback. I know this was very introductory. We only have so much time for a webinar. Most of these topics that you are asking for, they are covered within the bootcamp in more depth, of course, these and others. So if you really want to enter the world of data analytics, so to speak, and change your career, please look through the information on the course that we have on the green link that you see here. And let us know if you have any more specific questions about this. And maybe there's something, this is a very introductory topic that I want to learn. This will help me see if I want to join the bootcamp. Please let us know through feedbacks. You can send a message to Ironhack. Don't worry, and we'd love to hear feedback on the follow-up of this webinar.
Definitely, yeah.
All right. Here, Harry asks a very generic question. Any comments about Power BI and Tableau?
Yeah, again, it's the idea. Like once you know how to use one, I think you can use the other one. Like the concepts will be similar. I'm more accustomed to Tableau because my type of work, my work has basically used these tools in the past. But in terms of capability, the same. Power BI is mainly for Microsoft. So if you don't have a Microsoft computer, you cannot use it, which is also the situation I'm finding myself in. And to add to this comment as well, there's a new tool that it's killing it in the UK. So maybe guys also take a look at it, called Looker. And it's also a data visualization tool. And if you're interested in this topic, it's something that they are starting to ask a lot. It's similar to Tableau and Power BI, but just another tool. So learn one and you'll know easily how to pick up all of them.
Perfect. Guys, I think that was a great way to close this. If you have any questions after this, we will have a follow-up email with the recording and so on, so you can answer that. In any case, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you could follow along. Remember, if not, you have the recording, so you can review it later. You'll also have the access to the Ask a Question, so you can find here the links for the Tableau public version and the data set if you want to practice later. Thank you for your feedback. I don't know if you want to say something, Anna.
Yeah, guys, I just want to thank you for your attendance. It was great to see so many people come in August. I don't know in the other countries, but in August, in Spain, in Portugal, August is very holiday focused. So it's great to see that people are still joining these sessions. And yeah, I think keep learning and keep yourself motivated to learn new stuff. I think it's great.
Yeah, amazing. I couldn't say it better. And if you can, go rest now, guys. It's the end of the day. Great to see you here, and I hope to see you in upcoming webinars.
All right. Great to see you guys. Thank you for your time.
Bye.
Bye.